Okay guys, so it's rag joint time on the 91 GMC C3500. First thing I'm doing here is I am cleaning off the shaft right here. This shaft slides into the other one. This one slides into that one. It's a collapsible steering shaft. That's the reason they have that, is if you get in a bad accident, the steering wheel does not get shoved back at you. So what I've done is I've cleaned it off because it gets kind of cruddy, and I'll probably take a wire brush or something to clean it off and some blasters so it slides easily into there, because I need to take this whole assembly off. You got a bolt right there. Try to zoom in. Right there, there's a bolt. This side is, I believe, it's just kind of a round thing, but the threaded part's on the other side. Right there's the nut. So we got to take that off, and then there's a plastic shield on here. I showed in my steering box video. This plastic shield right here is snapped onto the line there. All you got to do is unsnap it there, slide it back, and there's a bolt that holds the steering shaft onto the steering box. But the rag joint is right in there, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so here's what I was able to find at the local auto parts store. This is what a rag joint is. Basically it's a piece of rubber that has 4 bolts, and it couples the steering shaft onto the steering box. So I guess they're calling that a steering coupler disc kit. But these are the two I found at the local auto parts store. I thought it was the bigger one, but looking at it, it might be the smaller one now. So I'm not really sure. This kit comes with you know, the miscellaneous nuts and bolts and stuff. So first we got to get the one out, the steering shaft out. We'll see what size this is. Hopefully one of these will work. So once you get the bolt out of the shaft right here, this comes off. You slide it down. I did have to use a hammer to get that to go down, so we still got too much crud and stuff there. So once I get this whole shaft out, I'll have to make sure this slides freely, so it's not such a pain trying to get it back hooked up onto the steering shaft. But there it is, just one bolt holding that on. Gonna go down to the steering box here. We'll have to move this plastic cover out of the way. Again, one bolt secures that on. Slide that off the steering box input shaft, and we'll get a better look at this rag joint. It's wore out. With that plastic cover slid back, that's the bolt you're looking to take off. You gotta completely take it off, because there's a notch in that input shaft that bolt slides in and locks in. Even if it's not tight, it still locks the shaft on there. So the bolt's got to be loosened up and taken out for this shaft to come completely out. And there's a bolt out of the coupler for the steering box. Not sure why it's pink, but I just had this out because I did the steering box, so it come out pretty easily. So 11 millimeter for this, 15 millimeter for the bolt on the top of the shaft. So now that both the bolts are out, that bolt there on the coupler, and that there is off. Should be able to slide that shaft backwards, slide it right off the steering box. So one other note I want to say is, once you get the steering shaft off, do not move the steering wheel, do not move the steering box, do not move anything. So you want this stuff to go right back the way it came out. So here's the shaft out of the truck, cleaned up a little bit. You can see there's supposed to be a boot right here and it's ripped. But there's a joint there that allows it to move. That one feels tight. And then here's the cover. Now in the truck, this cover is over everything and you can't see the rag joint. But when you slide it back, there's the rag joint that we're looking at. Now I really can't hold it and show you this at the same time, but you can see the looseness there in this joint. It's wore out. When it was on the truck, you could see that these rivets are loose. They've loosened up, and when you turn, you can see there's a little bit of play happening here. So we're going to replace that. You can replace the whole shaft. The auto parts store, I think, said 200 bucks. We're going to try to go the cheaper way here, I guess. This rag joints kits, I think they're about 10 bucks. And it looks like we're going to need the smaller one. So the 31002 Dorman steering coupler disc kit. I guess we'll get this one out. Hopefully it's the same size and the bolt holes all line up. If not, may end up having to buy the whole new shaft, but we're going to try to do this one. To get this apart, there's no bolts. It is rivets. So the heads of these rivets are going to have to be ground off, and there's 4 of them. So they're going to have to all be ground off, and then we'll be replacing those with bolts. So I'm going to get my grinder out, start grinding these off. Okay, so I ended up pulling the shaft apart, and you can see this shaft slides inside of that one, and that's how you get your collapsing steering column shaft. There is a little deal right here. It's kind of a spring that kind of snaps into a indentation inside this shaft there. One thing you want to do is mark it before you pull it off. I pulled it off and it fell on the floor. Now I don't exactly know which way it goes. I mean, there's 2 ways it can go, this way or this way. It's kind of important to know that. I'm gonna have to go to the truck, find out the orientation of this and the steering box shaft, and yeah, I'll have to do that because I didn't mark it right. But anyway, I did that to get this off there, and I'm gonna have a lot easier time grinding these rivets. You can actually see them better too. So I'm gonna get to grinding. Okay, so after grinding the rivet heads off, I took a punch and a hammer and pounded them out. You can see I kind of got a little bit of the shield there, or this metal thing, but not too bad. Take your time. These are not wanting to come out of the actual shaft, so I'm going to have to probably cut these rivets off flush and then pound them out. And then I've got these rivets here that have to be knocked out of there. So 2 rivets on there. So it's going to be a little bit of grinding here and a little bit of time. So when I get everything done here, we'll test fit the new rag joint. Well, I got it all together here. Here's the old rag joint. And this one here is just a little bit bigger around. So it's kind of binding up in these factory couplers. And I suppose I could have used these ones. Maybe that's what I should have done. And it wouldn't have kind of bound up like it is in here. But I got my own bolts here. And yeah, I'm not really happy with this. I think I'm just going to order the whole new shaft. because this thing here, this is leaking grease and the boot's shot anyway. But I'm gonna assemble this. I'm gonna put it back in the truck. This should tell me, you know, if this is where the slop is coming from, because this should be tight now, even though it don't quite fit. So I'm gonna assemble this. I gotta figure out where my orientation of the shafts go before I slide it in here. I've cleaned up the shaft so it slides in and out so I can get it hooked up easier. Don't forget this little deal here that kind of locks it in. It's a little spring deal. I'll probably put some white lithium grease or something in the shaft there, but it ain't gonna be in there very long. I'm gonna order it. As soon as I get the new one, I'll install it. So okay, so there it is installed. It went on pretty easily. Still had to pound this side back onto the steering deal. It must be a pretty snug fit up there, but it looks good. Everything feels tight and everything. So you notice the shield is not on this steering shaft anymore. I want to keep an eye on these bolts, make sure they're not doing anything funny. I do have lock washers on all of them, so should be okay. Probably gonna order that new shaft fairly quickly here. It actually eliminates the rag joint completely, which it's probably worth the upgrade. It replaces this rag joint with an actual universal joint, so it's probably worth the money to upgrade to that, and that's probably what I'll end up doing here. So as soon as that shows up, probably be doing an install on that. But I'm gonna take this for a test drive and see how she runs. Should be a noticeable improvement because it's way tighter than it was. So a quick drive with the truck, and instantly I noticed that the steering is tighter. There's not this fraction of a second delay when you're moving the steering wheel back and forth, and also you're not chasing the truck when like a bump or the wind blows you around. So that is the problem. I pretty much figured it was the problem because I could see the rivets were loose in that coupler. Not really happy with the repair because that rag joint really wasn't the right size. Okay, so some more driving with the new rag joint, and I'm feeling something in the steering. I think I found it. The bolt, the head of the bolt is getting hit. You can see where there's a mark there on that bolt. It's getting hit somehow with the shaft, the steering shaft, and I'm feeling that in the steering. I mean, it's not going to come apart or anything. I mean, that rag joint is strong. It's just flexing somehow. Probably too big of a bolt head. You know, if something, I needed like a flat head or something. Bolt. But I'm going to order the whole new shaft. But it's just something else I noticed here after I did the install. So I am going to order that new updated shaft with the universal joint that eliminates the rag joint. I think that's going to be well worth the money. I know it's not cheap, but I think it's going to be well worth it. So if you got slop in your steering, you can't figure it out, I'd check that rag joint on these trucks, guys. Probably your issue. So I guess that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.